The Gonzaga Bulldogs posed for a team picture right at the transfer portal deadline, sending a message of unity not only to the fan base, but to a particular high-scoring transfer guard out of Arkansas who is visiting Spokane this weekend.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Thursday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Well, the Zags are reportedly hosting Arkansas transfer guard Khalif Battle this weekend. We're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss the transfer portal closing and Gonzaga keeping most of the roster intact. We're also going to close out the show with some Zags in the NBA playoffs talk as two former Gonzaga players advance to the conference semifinals. So, transfer portal closed at 9 p.m. Pacific time on May 1st. Of course, it was midnight Eastern time was when the portal was officially done. No more players could enter the transfer portal. Obviously, players who are currently in the transfer portal have as long as they desire to end up choosing a school. Most programs are going to want their roster set by probably June or so. So I expect of the 1,800 or so players that are in the transfer portal, the majority of them are going to commit in the next 30 to 45 days or so. But about 10 minutes before the portal deadline officially, Gonzaga posted a picture of the team in those super sick royal blue jerseys that they wore last year, I think in the San Diego game. And it was a picture of all of Gonzaga's returning players who were on last year's roster. So Michael Ajayi was not in the picture. Kate Orness, the new walk-on, was not in the picture. But everybody else who was returning to this roster, that included Steele Venters, that included Jun-Suk Yo, and of course included the starting lineup with Holgmren and Nembhard. And I guess Steele Venters, Dusty Stromer were both in the picture. Ben Gregg was in the picture. Graham Ike was in the picture. Braden Huff. You get the picture. Everybody who's returning is back. It was a message, a distinct message. This core is not going anywhere. There are not going to be any late last-minute surprises. The last-minute surprise was Luka Krajinovic entering the portal. There are not any more. And after that was posted, we got assistant coach Stephen Gentry retweeting it, talking about unity and family and culture. We got Ben Gregg retweeting it, saying that the grass isn't always greener at other places. We got Ben Gregg's dad retweeting it. Everybody is trying to send a message. This team is together. They're prepared to run it back next year with a group that went to the Sweet 16 and really found their groove in the second half of the year. But also, this was a not-so-subtle message directed right at Khalif Battle, a 6'5" guard from Edison, New Jersey, who has played college basketball for the last 5 years, but due to multiple medical injuries, has another year of eligibility and is potentially going to spend it in Spokane. Folks, this is a monumental potential addition. This is the kind of player that takes Gonzaga to that next level. This is what they needed, a microwave type scorer coming off the bench. Let's talk a little bit about who Khalif Battle is. He began his career at Butler in the 2019-20 season. That was a long time ago. The season that Killian Tilly was still at Gonzaga, the season with Ryan Woolridge at point guard, that was Khalif Battle's first season of college basketball. Again, from Edison, New Jersey, starts his career out at Butler, averages 3 points in 11 minutes per game, plays 24 games with the Bulldogs, hits the transfer portal. It wasn't even the transfer portal at that time. Transfers after the season, ends up at Temple in the American Athletic Conference, spends 3 years with the Owls of Temple. In his first game, he played just 11 games because of injury, started 4 of them, averaged 15 points per game. His next season, he only played 7 games. He was a monster in those 7 games, 21.5 points per game, shot 49% from 3, but it was 7 games. Then he comes back in his first senior year and finally has a more or less full healthy season. He plays 27 games for Temple in the 2022-23 season, starts 8 of them, plays about 32 minutes per night. This is one of the first times we've actually seen him play a full season as a regular contributor starter. Again, well, not as a starter. He only started 8 of those 27 games. In that season, though, he averaged 18 points per game, 3.5 boards, 1.8 assists, 1 steal, and shot 35% from 3. So after that season, he's played 3 years at Temple. Most of them have been injury riddled. The 1 year at Butler where he didn't really get off the bench. He transfers to join Eric Musselman in Arkansas on a team that Eric Musselman just recruited every guard he possibly could on last year's roster. And look, things did not go well for Arkansas last year. It was a disastrous season for the Musbus. Part of the reason that he's departed, he's out the door, he's at USC. They bring in John Calipari. They're trying to just wipe the slate clean and start over because things did not go well for the Hogs last year. But Khalif Battle was good. He was good for this team. And his overall numbers don't quite paint the full picture. He played 32 games for Arkansas, started 13 of them. Averaged 15 points, 3.3 boards, 1.3 assists, shot 35% from three, and 87% from the free throw line. But as much as we want to talk about the scope of Battle's entire career, which has spanned many, many years, I want to focus on the final 7 games that Battle played for Arkansas last year. Because boy, howdy, did this young man go absolutely off the rails crazy in those final 7 games that he played. These are his averages in the final 7 games he played in Arkansas uniform. 29.6 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.6 steals. The funny thing is the three-point percentage didn't even dramatically increase. He shot 35.6% from three. He was a red-hot 93.5% from the free throw line. But this dude at the end of the year was a certified bucket for Arkansas. He dropped 42 points against Mizzou. That was what started this 7-game streak of prolific scoring for Battle. 42 points against Mizzou. Follow that up the next game with 36 points against Vanderbilt. Follow that up the next game with 34 points on the road at Rupp Arena against Kentucky. Now you might be saying, Mizzou didn't win a game in the SEC. Vanderbilt was the second worst team in the SEC. Everybody scored a bunch of points against Kentucky. And folks, you'd be right. But guess what? I'm still going to take a guy who can drop 42 against Mizzou, 36 against Vanderbilt, and 34 against Kentucky to come into the WCC. Still going to take that. Think those odds are pretty good that he's going to be a dude who can score and in a microwave fashion, get red hot type of scorer in that WCC if he can drop 42 against teams in the SEC. That is unbelievable. So now he's looking for another home. As everybody at Arkansas entered the transfer portal. Of course, there was a coaching change. It sounds like there was some strife internally with that Arkansas program as well. And Battle's getting attention, not just from Gonzaga, of course, but there's a reason that there is a big push from the Gonzaga staff, from the players, everybody on social media trying to get Battle to come to Spokane. He recently wrapped up a visit at Villanova. And like we said, he's from New Jersey, has spent the majority of his playing career nowhere close to the West Coast. So certainly that's going to play at least some level of a factor here. He wrapped up a visit to Villanova, but he didn't commit while he was at Villanova. He chose to still take his visit to Spokane, which is happening this weekend. That's a really good sign. If you're Gonzaga, if you can convince a player to still come to your visit after they've gone somewhere else, you feel your odds go up quite a bit of potentially landing said player. He's also visited TCU and Arizona State. A source told Adam Zagoria, who's a college basketball writer for, I believe, the New Jersey Times, said that the Zags and Villanova are, quote, pretty high on his list. They didn't quite commit to a final 2, but it sounds like Gonzaga and Villanova are the front runners right now for Khalif Battle, and Gonzaga's getting that second visit. That sweet, sweet second visit. You want to be the last place a player visits. That is always the spot that you want to be in. And he's visiting Gonzaga knowing what their roster looks like. Now, of course, because the transfer portal is now closed, you got a better sense of what Villanova's roster looks like, but they still have to add pieces. They've lost a lot of players in the portal. Kyle Neptune's pitch to Khalif Battle is basically, we're going to put a lot of good pieces around you. Mark Few's pitch is, we already have them. They're already here. We know what your role is going to look like. And I think that's the thing is if Battle's willing to play the role that Gonzaga has identified for him, this is a match made in heaven, legitimately a perfect match. Battle started 32 out of the 101 games he's played in his career. He is not a starter, and Gonzaga doesn't have a starting job open. So this is perfect. He comes in, he's effectively going to be a beefed up version of Luka Krajnovic's role. And I say beefed up, meaning like a lot more minutes. We were projecting Krajnovic at like 8 to 10 minutes per game-ish next year. Battle's going to play more than that. And where those minutes are going to come from, if he commits, that's a conversation we'll have. They'll come from Steel Venters. They'll come from Dusty Stromer. They'll probably come from the 2 starting guards who will play a little bit less minutes. There's going to be a shift. Some guys aren't going to get to play as much, but when you're a team that's trying to compete for a national championship, you got to have 9 or 10 good players. And in the transfer portal era, it's really hard to have 9 or 10 good players on the roster. If Gonzaga lands Battle, they will be in that position. They will have a full roster of talented players who are ready to help this team compete for a national title. And yes, that means somebody's not going to play enough. That's an okay problem to have. That is an okay problem to have. And getting a player like Battle, who's already used to coming off the bench, who's already played that microwave scorer role. He's, again, I say beefed up Luka Krajinovic for this role. Think of him as like a more scoring focused Malachi Smith. I think that's maybe the better comparison of like a dude who plays a lot of minutes, who you bring in off the bench, who can be your leading scorer in some games. Some games he's maybe not going to have as big of an impact, but sometimes it's like, okay, Battle's the guy for this game. He's going to go drop 25 or 28 or 32 or 42 like he did against Mizzou last year. The other big thing about Khalif Battle that I think really helps this Gonzaga team is his ability to get to the free throw line. This is a staggering stat that I saw. He made 186 free throws last year. He took 213 of them, made 186 of them. It's like 87-ish% from the free throw line. Graham Ike led Gonzaga last year in free throw attempts. Ike took 134 free throws to lead Gonzaga. Battle made 186 free throws. And again, he spent most of last year coming off the bench. If he played 37 minutes per game last year, you'd be like, yeah, of course he's, the guy who had more free throw attempts than anybody else on Gonzaga's roster. He played a bunch of minutes. That's not the case. He is so good at drawing contact and getting to the free throw line. And to be great at drawing contact and getting to the line while also being excellent at making your free throws, that's a tremendous skill. He took 6.7 free throw attempts per game last year at Arkansas. And again, made them at an 87.3% clip. That skill combined with his outside shooting, combined with his veteran experience, it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect fit. I mean, honestly, you couldn't do better than this. Folks, we're going to continue to talk about Battle after the visit, especially if he commits. We're going to have all sorts of conversations about what this means for Gonzaga's roster next year. But right now, I want to talk about the fact that the portal is officially closed and very few teams did as well retention-wise as Mark Few's club. So what does it mean for the rest of the offseason? We're going to get to that in just a second. Right after I tell you that today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Folks, I have been told that I am a competitive person, and let's be honest, it's true. I have a competitive side, as everybody does, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it is a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is getting to mess with my friends. I can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself, and the leaderboard shows me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or the Google Play Store. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And folks, the transfer portal is closed as we record this on Thursday morning. Players cannot enter the transfer portal anymore. The players that are on Gonzaga's roster are set for right now. As I said at the opening, of course, the players who are currently in the transfer portal have basically an unlimited amount of time to decide where they are going to transfer. So there are still tons and tons and tons of movement that is going to happen this offseason. But players who are not currently in the transfer portal, they are locked into where they are. So let's take a step back and just take a look at Gonzaga's roster here on the second day of May as we get a better picture of what this is going to look like in the 2024-25 college basketball season. Who is out? 4 players have departed Gonzaga's basketball program this offseason. The first is Anton Watson, who we've known from the very beginning. He cannot return. He's out of eligibility. He's done. He's moving on to his professional career. He just signed with a new agency. It's Lil Wayne's agency, interestingly enough. He's going to pursue a career in the NBA, whether he gets invited to the Combine or the G League Combine or whatever happens for him after that. We'll, of course, keep you updated on that. But he's not coming back to Gonzaga. After that, 3 players have entered the transfer portal out of Gonzaga. Pavle Stosic, Luka Krajinovic, and Colby Brooks. Colby Brooks is, of course, a walk-on, so he was not taking up one of the scholarship spots. He's already drawn attention from a handful of Division I programs. Great for him. Portland State, Denver, Cal Poly, to name a few, have reached out to him. Pavle Stosic and Luka Krajinovic were both on scholarship. Neither of them played big roles last year. The biggest loss, unquestionably, out of this three is Luka Krajinovic. We spoke about him at length on Wednesday's episode when we found out he was entering the transfer portal. What it means for Gonzaga means they need to go pursue guards. We find out less than 24 hours that they're hosting Khalif Battle on a visit. Those things are very, very clearly linked. It's unfortunate for Krajinovic that that's the situation. Hopefully he can find a home, whether it's still in college basketball or perhaps back overseas, that is going to be fulfilling for him going forward. Stosic just never really got off the ground. He was a super late addition to Gonzaga's roster, didn't even sign with the team until late September after school had already started, didn't get enough time to really acclimate himself to the system, wasn't going to get a lot of playing time next year, so not a huge shock to see him enter the portal as well. So 4 guys are out. And as of right now, 2 guys are in. The 2 players that are in are Michael Ajayi, the 6'7" transfer forward from Pepperdine, native of Kent, Washington, spent 2 years at a junior college, blew up last year for the Waves in his first year in the WCC, first year of Division I basketball, averaged about 17 and 10, was a solid 3-point shooter on low volume attempts. He's in the NBA draft process. We'll talk about that momentarily, but it is Michael Ajayi and Cade Orness. Cade Orness is a preferred walk-on. He is joining the team from North Kitsap High School. He is basically just a direct replacement for Colby Brooks. Walk on, not going to play legitimate minutes. He's going to play mostly in garbage time. He's not taking up a scholarship. Again, just a direct replacement for Colby Brooks. So think of Ajayi as a replacement for Watson or Ness as a replacement for Brooks. That effectively means you got to replace Luka Krajinovic and Pavle Stosic. And again, neither of those guys played big minutes last year, so that's what's hard, is trying to find players to replace them who want to be here, but who are willing to not necessarily play the biggest role in the world. Now, what can change? There's only one thing that can really change. Michael Ajayi is the only player on Gonzaga's roster who is in the NBA draft process. Because the transfer portal is closed, nobody else can leave. Obviously, there could be injuries, things like that, whatever, but that's a very minute chance of that. So effectively, the only thing that can really change is if Michael Ajayi were to keep himself in the NBA draft process, hire an agent, and decide to not come back to school. This is a possibility. I think that it is a small possibility, but it is a possibility. Right now, as somebody who consumes NBA draft content extremely regularly, Michael Ajayi is not on NBA draft boards. He is not on big boards that extend all the way up to 100 people. If you go on a Fanspo's website right now and you create yourself a mock draft and you just go through and do an entire mock draft because you're bored at work, which is something that people, cough, cough, do sometimes, you're not going to see Michael Ajayi's name on there at all. It's not on there. Anton Watson's name, by the way, is on there somewhere in the 90s, but Michael Ajayi's name is not on there. Now, that does not mean that because a website like Fanspo or mock drafts written by people who are not professional scouts, just because that is Michael Ajayi's name is not affiliated with any of that, doesn't mean that NBA scouts are not interested in him, does not mean that things could not change in the future, does not mean that he is guaranteed to come back. I put the odds of him returning to school and coming to Gonzaga at 95 to 98%. I really think it's likely that he's going to come back. He's already signed the paperwork. He's not going anywhere else. He's not re-entering the transfer portal. He's either Gonzaga or the NBA. And I think he's going to get valuable feedback, but I think ultimately scouts are going to say, we have only seen you play 1 year of Division I basketball, and most of your damage came against not very good teams. We need to see more. Go to Gonzaga. You get an opportunity to play against UConn. You get an opportunity to play multiple other high-level programs in the non-conference slate. You'll get opportunities in the WCC in a more NBA-style offense that Mark Few runs. You'll get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. We want to see all of that and then come back to us, and we'll see where you're at. That's what I think the feedback's going to be. There's going to be more specific stuff they want to see, probably more outside shooting, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the feedback he's going to get, and he's going to say, okay, and he's going to come back to Gonzaga. And nothing else can change. The hard deadline on the transfer portal makes it a little bit easier. It's not perfect, and we will have conversations in future shows about the problems with the transfer portal. We've already talked about it a handful of times, but it's pretty clear that things need to change in some capacity. But a hard deadline at least means that from this point forward, we know that no other players are going to leave Gonzaga's roster. This roster is pretty darn set. The Zags have 13 scholarships available. 9 of them are filled. They're not going to fill the other 4. Not all of them, I should say. They're going to fill some of them. Probably going to fill 2 of them. At minimum, they're going to fill one of them. Might happen this weekend with Khalif Battle. But they're not going to fill all 13 scholarships. Most teams are not doing that anymore because it's just pointless to have players on scholarship at the very end of your bench if they're just going to transfer every single year. And look, this roster churn has been happening since before the transfer portal. And I think it's important we acknowledge that. There are players that some of you might remember if you're really, really paying attention to the ins and outs of Gonzaga's roster year over year that have kind of matriculated in and out somewhat inconspicuously, but now because there's a transfer portal, because they get an announcement every time they decide to leave, you hear more about it. But if you remember folks like Jakob Larson or Ryan Edwards or Luke Meikle or Gerard Coleman or like anybody, Angel Nunez, like there are guys who've been in and out of Gonzaga's program in a year where they transferred in, they transferred out, they just mysteriously kind of disappeared off the roster the next year because there wasn't as much conversation about roster churn. So the bottom half of Gonzaga's roster and the bottom half of high-level Division I college basketball programs has always kind of had this sort of churn. It gets a lot more attention now because people like to say flashy numbers of there's 2,000 players in the transfer portal when like a lot of them are the Colby Brooks type people. I'm not saying anything negative about Colby Brooks, just that like he's the kind of player that would have matriculated off of Gonzaga's roster and found himself somewhere else in previous eras before the transfer portal. So I don't think that it's something that should be this like huge alarming concern. But for Gonzaga right now, they have 9 players on scholarship and all of them are going to play. And that's going to soak up a lot of the minutes. Now, they're obviously identifying a player that would fill a huge role in Khalif Battle, who would, at that point, they would then have 10 players on scholarship, and they don't have room for anybody else. Maybe they add another like really young developmental piece. Somebody like a Pavle Stosic, if they find somebody internationally that they like, maybe they just find somebody domestically that they like that they can bring in as a scholarship, basically a warm body to fill a spot, spend a year in Spokane. If that player wants to stick around and continue to develop in the program, great. If they don't, great. They move on. That's okay. But right now, Gonzaga is probably only going to fill 2 of the 4 spots that they have remaining. And we suspect that, again, since we said that Orness replaces Brooks and Ajayi replaces Anton Watson, the 2 spots that are getting replaced are Luka Krajinovic and Pavle Stosic. We've talked about Khalif Battle. We talked about on yesterday's show, on Wednesday's show, other young guards Gonzaga is pursuing, whether it's incoming freshmen like Nolan Traore or Trent Perry, whether it's transfers like Rowan Brumbaugh or Emmanuel Innocente or Wesley Yates. Like there are options Gonzaga is pursuing right now. Obviously, all of their chips are in the Khalif Battle basket, as they should be. He's an incredibly talented player. Outside of that, I think they probably do look for a developmental big to have behind Graham Ike and Braden Huff and Ben Gregg. But Yo can slide into that spot. Michael Ajayi will probably play some small ball for, especially if they land Battle. If they get Khalif Battle, there's going to be lineups with Hickman, Nembhard, and Khalif Battle all on the floor at the same time. In those lineups, Michael Ajayi might be playing the small ball 4. You could then have Ben Gregg playing the 5 and just have a really spaced out offense. How in the heck is this? You know, I know Zach E's not in college basketball anymore, but like those big guys who can get put on skates, who can't defend away from the rim, you play 5 out like that, they don't got a chance. Now you're going to have a hard time defending them on the other end. So that's kind of the trade-off there. But Gonzaga's going to have some serious options if Battle were to commit. And I think it would create a situation where there's not going to be room for any other additions to get any meaningful minutes. So if they are to fill those final scholarship spots, or at least one of them, it's probably not with somebody who's expected to play really any consistent minutes at all. Well, folks, we're going to close out the show today. Talked about Chet Holgmren and Julian Strawther. They both have advanced in the NBA playoff to the conference semifinals. Will Andrew Nembhard and Jalen Suggs follow suit? We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Game Time. The weather is finally heating up, folks, and that means it is time to take in some Major League Baseball games. And great news, Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and Game Time's lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. One of my favorite features they have is the last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% buying last-minute tickets, not only for sporting events, but for comedy shows, theater, concerts, and more. And I often worry about my tickets being fake and showing up to the event and having it be very embarrassing because they can't take my ticket. But with Game Time, your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry, and I love having that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, closing out today's show with a quick look at the Zags in the NBA playoffs. We'll start with Chet, Holgmren, and Oklahoma City. They have swept the New Orleans Pelicans and are moving on to the conference semifinals. There's a 1 seed over an 8 seed, so you're not surprised that Oklahoma City is moving on. Nice to see them pick up the sweep, though. This team will take on the winner of the Clippers and Mavericks series. Right now, Dallas is up 3-2 in that series, so it could be a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander versus Luka Doncic matchup in the second round there. Chet was fantastic in the first 2 games of the series, in particular, 15 points, 11 boards, 5 blocks in game 1, 26 points, 7 boards in game 2. A little quieter after that. He had just 6 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks in game 3, and then 14 points, 9 boards, and 5 assists in game 4. So quieter, yes, still very, very effective as Oklahoma City advances there. We also see Julian Strawther and the Denver Nuggets advance past the Lakers. We'll talk about the Rui Hachimura side of things in a second. Denver will take on the Minnesota Timberwolves and red-hot Anthony Edwards in the conference semifinals. Julian Strawther did not play in the playoffs at all. We'll see if he gets into opportunities here in the second series, but still getting a chance to potentially pick up a ring in his first year in the NBA if Denver continues to play well. On the other side, Rui and the Lakers eliminated in 5 games, in 5 games. Tough to see for them. They fought valiantly to get a win in this series after going down 3-0. They lost on a game winner in game 5 from Jamal Murray, so almost had an opportunity to push this thing to 6. Rui didn't have a very great performance in the playoffs, but he did have 15 points, 5 boards, and an assist in that game 5 loss. Now we see if the Lakers keep this core together, if they try to blow things up, what it could potentially mean for Rui. We will track that this offseason. That leaves Andrew Nembhard and Jalen Suggs, who are both down 3-2 in their respective series. Nembhard is with the Pacers, of course, and they're down 3-2 to the Bucks of Milwaukee. Game 6 is Thursday afternoon. As I'm recording this Thursday morning, it's about 6 hours from right now. So many of you are listening to this probably after that game has started or even after it is over. Nembhard has scored in double figures in 4 out of the 5 games this series. In his most recent game, in game 5, he had 12 points, 5 assists, and a steal. He has been a huge part of Indiana's success so far in this playoff series. We'll see if they can get it done on Thursday and force a game 7 against Milwaukee. And then Jalen Suggs and the Magic, they're down 3-2 right now to Donovan Mitchell and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Game 6 is Friday at 4 Pacific time. So if you're looking for something to watch on Friday evening, go check out Jalen Suggs trying to fight for his team's playoff chances. Suggs had 13 points, 5 boards, 2 steals, and a block in the team's game 5 loss. It was a 104-103 loss. Suggs has played very well so far. His outside shooting's been a little inconsistent. Not that that's abnormal for him really in general. I did notice that in 4 of the 5 games that Jalen Suggs has played, he had exactly 1 turnover, which is fantastic. We just want to try to ignore the other game where he had 7 turnovers in 1 contest. Certainly a bit of an aberration there, but Suggs and Nembhard both have the opportunity to help push their teams forward into the conference semifinals. Would be incredibly cool if we get an opportunity to see them play against each other. That would be very, very fun. Also an opportunity potentially for Julian Strawther and Chet Holmgren to face off against each other. Although, again, with Strawther not really playing, I don't know that it would be as exciting as Suggs and Nembhard, who would legitimately guard each other for 30-plus minutes a night if that series were to happen. We'll keep you updated on what's going on with the Zags in the NBA playoffs throughout the rest of the month. That's going to wrap it up for us today here, though, on the Locked On Zags podcast. Want to thank all of you for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be back on Friday. If there's any transfer portal updates, we'll get those your way as well. If not, we're going to do another one of our season in review series episodes. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.